So Ooga Booga, that actually, that's such a great, fun title to say. That became available today, correct?
Yeah, it's available today on our brand new little streaming movie site called grindhouseflix.com. It kind of will be, it'll be sort of everywhere at the end of March. Redbox, various video rental places available online, and then Time Warner, Comcast, all the pay cable and internet suppliers or providers. That'll all happen later in March into early April, but technically the world premiere is today on grindhouseflix.com.
Well, I really like the idea of Grindhouse Flix because it's essentially you're trying to build kind of a Netflix for outside of the mainstream movies.
Exactly. Way outside. No, definitely. No, there's nothing quite like it out there. I mean, I've got Netflix, and they've done an amazing thing. They got a gazillion subscribers. But, I think eventually that the idea of having a very affordable subscription to a streaming movie site, whether you watch the movies as just a renter, or you want to own them forever and you want to digitally download them and store them somewhere, I think that's a big part of the future as more and more people sort of catch on and understand it. That way you can play it on any device, and it's a lot of fun, and I think there's a big opening. It's going to take a while. I mean, we have, just a handful of subscribers. We're brand new. But we're certainly going to take all the movies that we're making, or most of them, and some unannounced projects we're involved with, and always put them out there first. So hopefully, in a year or two, we'll have enough of a following and enough, users and subscribers where, it may really help us, fund some of these things.
It really has changed, hasn't it, the industry and how people choose to watch movies? Because you're a major leader in the direct-to-video market, and as the DVD sales have kind of been dwindling, I would imagine the internet and streaming and those kinds of options are where it's at now.
Well, it's interesting. As much as I am a fan of all this, it's not really taking a foothold in the real sort of bottom line of, okay, we are making hopefully clever but very modestly priced films. What sort of contribution will all this digital revenue from all these various services make versus, physical goods, DVDs, Redbox, and the like. And it's, in spite of all the hoopla, it really is just a tiny percentage. We still are getting much or most of our early revenue from DVD sales and some foreign sales.
So tell me about Ooga Booga. I'm going to say that title as much as I possibly can because I love it so much. How did this project come about? What appealed to you about it?
Well, he's like a lot of the characters in these films and the puppets and dolls, I always try to keep some of them alive. I mean, we have our more well-known franchises like Puppetmaster and Demonic Toys and Evil Bong and the Ginger Dead Man and all that silly stuff, and pictures I've been making for 20, 30 years, and those are the franchises. But a lot of the standalone films have sort of, given birth to characters that I know I'm going to either pull through and have them land somewhere else. And in the case of Ooga Booga, I made a movie, I'm thinking about 10 years ago, called Doll Graveyard. And one of the characters in Doll Graveyard, I'm not sure if he was called Ooga Booga back then, was this sort of African doll. And he resurfaced briefly in Evil Bong, which was the name says it all, starring Tommy Chong. And I just thought, this character, and then he was, I think, called Ooga Booga, but I just really wanted him to have his own feature because I just think he's perfect. And then, I don't know, about a year ago, I was, wanting to make a film that in some way that was sort of fun, even though it's not a funny topic, dealt with racism and dealt with the absurdity of what racism really is. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, and I heard about Django being made, which I thought was awesome because I grew up in Italy and steady diet of spaghetti westerns, and I knew the players. My dad made a lot of those films. So I thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe I can make sort of a little bit of a send-up. Maybe I can bring Ooga Booga back and, have him be like a little Django, just create a story that will be fun and sort of current. And it sort of took shape that way, and then more elements came into play. Then at a certain point, I'm thinking, well, wait, I'm what inspired me day one, pretty much for making all these puppet and doll movies was the Karen Black episode of Trilogy of Terror back in the '70s. I was one of those people, who saw it on TV, and it just blew my mind. I thought, oh my God, this is fantastic. So, because there is in our movie this black avenging doll, I thought, well, I should maybe see if I can get Karen Black in the movie, and wrote a scene specifically, or a few scenes for her, and she was totally game. So the scene or the several scenes that, well, especially when she encounters Ooga Booga, is a complete homage to Trilogy of Terror and the African doll that terrorized her, 30 odd years ago. So there's some fun in it. If people know, some of the history, I think they'll get an extra. A little extra amusement, but the picture plays real well. It's a great little mix of, it's got a few bloody, gory moments, but it's hopefully clever, and it's got some humor wrapped around it, and it's kind of a textbook full moon film, I guess.
Well, and you mentioned something earlier that I think is fascinating about these films. Because on the surface, I mean, they're fun rides. They give an audience exactly what they want, but they do also allow for you to kind of explore themes like racism on a pretty subversive level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do that. I don't wrap a lot of meaning, or it's not. These movies are purely entertainment, but if people really take a big step away from my body of work, because the next movie we shoot will be my 263rd movie. So, when they look at all this, someone's going to figure out there are some themes that run through these movies, and I think more than anything else, they're not torture horror. They're generally fantasy films that are, I think I've made a handful that are actually genuinely really scary, but they're more fantasy, fantastic, maybe creepy, and especially fun. And I try to create some three-dimensional characters, because so many of these films, even ones with much larger budgets, the effects are, whether you like them or not, they're the stars, the star of the film, but you don't really remember the people, you don't really care about the people, and I can't even afford those kind of effects, and I'm not a fan of CGI, so. You try to make these things character-driven, invent situations that, just hopefully are more clever. Not everyone turns out that way, but that's sort of the goal.
And you really have kind of stayed away from the masked killer. It's really a lot more inventive than that. I mean, if you look at movies like Puppetmaster, the Puppetmaster series, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's never appealed to me as even a film goer. Not to say there aren't a few incredibly well crafted sort of, they're calling them torture horror films today, or films that are, slasher movies, but one of the best ones of all is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and people who haven't seen it, even people who have seen it, think they've seen some of the most gory stuff ever, but it's not true. It's just really, really wonderful filmmaking. I mean, the picture is old. I don't know how many years now, 30 odd years old, but even when I saw it for the first time in a theater, it was just gut-wrenching, and later on I was thinking, God, they were so clever, and that's an exception, because generally speaking, those kind of movies are not, for me at least, not fun to watch. And then the more current torture horror films, Saw and all those films, are just not my cup of tea. So I'm just trying to find clever ways to either scare people or creep them out a little bit, but with a little humor wrapped in, and hopefully doing what we can do, which is making these films not so predictable. I mean, some of them turn out to be, I guess, predictable, but I like fooling people, and 30 minutes into the movie, it's like, you got to be kidding me, they're going there. I mean, movies like From Beyond and Reanimator and Dolls, and a lot of those films in the 80s, I had a little more money to work with. I think accomplished that maybe a little better, but you do the best you can. The world has changed, enormously since those movies were made.
You directed Ooga Booga, as you've directed so many other films. Is there a different level of investment for you when you, kind of emotional investment for you when you're directing, as opposed to just producing a project?
A little bit. With most movies I've produced, I'm very close to the projects. I mean, I've invented, with few exceptions, the material, worked with the writer, been involved with the casting, worked with the director, and been super involved with, the edit and the post-production and the mix and the whole shebang, and of course the campaign, which is pretty much where it all starts and ends. And so, yeah, I think no matter whether I've directed it or not, they're all kind of coming out of my shop. But when you direct something and put in that extra time, which is on one hand a joy, and on the other hand tricky, because I'm also trying to run a business, and I've kind of stayed in business for a lot of years, which is by itself a hat trick. You do have a little more invested, and then when people either, the fans, I think, generally love these films, and I've been lucky enough to, been able to make them forever. But, sometimes the reviews are like so just vitriolic. I think, whoa. Two things. I first think, well, I'd love you, Mr. Reviewer, to come on board and you try to make one of these things with, a 7-day shoot and, the cappuccino budget of a major, tentpole movie. Because, so many of the problems and so many of the things that I've read over the years, reviews of my movies, could be easily fixed if I had more money. It wasn't really that I couldn't have, done this or had this effect or had more effects but you work within your means, and it is what it is. So sometimes that gets, but then a lot of people take these pictures for what they are. They're kind of clever, they're fun, they're escapism. They're not, these aren't really message movies. And the other thing that I'm so dead set against is I'm a huge fan of effects that are organic. I don't care how much money these pictures have, and you have a movie like the last few big tentpole movies that got released, $200-300 million movies, Oz and
that's
the one was last week. These are $200 to $300 million. I could take that money, put it in an interest-bearing account, and make movies for all eternity. These are crazy numbers. So, and all these movies are special effects CGI films, which, on occasion with the right effect, can be, it can be well done. They're very expensive effects, but for me, 90% of it is cartoony, and I'm just not a fan. So, I've sort of, it's not so much I'm old school. I just don't like CGI. So, sometimes you have to forgive maybe the rubbery effects or forgive things that are not quite what maybe a CGI, a budget of $10 million could produce. But, in many ways, I think they're more organically interesting and pull you in, because when we have people reacting in front of all these movies, reacting to Ooga Booga, puppets, dolls, they're real. They're right there on set. We may have 5 puppeteers with 15 rods animating them that we'll paint out later, but the actor's not reacting to a green screen or a blue screen. I think that even in our modest way, I think that shines through.
And I think people really appreciate that. The practicality of it. And you have a tremendous fan base, and I know it seems to me that you take every opportunity to kind of rub elbows with the fans.
Yeah, I do. I love that.
What surprises you most about that interaction that you have with fans?
Well, I don't want to say I'm jaded, but I've been sort of out there pounding the pavement now for maybe 15 years. And the last 6-7 years, I've been to over 100 cities. I did a road show. I did a tour. It was kind of a weird Oz Fest. I brought people on tour. I brought celebrity guys. I brought guillotines. We did so much craziness on the road, and we attracted over the years tens of thousands of fans. And I've spoken to most of them, because after each show, I'll sit down. The way we fund the show is to sell merchandise. So anyone who buys anything at these shows, I'm there to sign it for free. I don't charge. So I have a chance, kind of a one-on-one, as people line up after these shows, and anywhere from a low of 200 to as many as 1,000 people attend each show. So I have this sort of rare opportunity to talk to lots of people, for a minute or two, albeit, but nonetheless, I'm able to get feedback, and the feedback is really always very interesting. You learn a lot. You learn what people like. You learn that a lot of what you hear from traditional distributors, retailers, wholesalers, is really not what the fans are looking for at all. It's really ironic. But the trouble is that in order many times to get a movie on a video store shelf or a movie on on some kind of roster, you have to do things or create a campaign or a copy line that you know is really not what the fan would probably respond better to, but you got to sort of still get on the video store shelf, so to speak, even though today it's a little bit of everything. So you learn a lot, but the coolest thing is just talking to people who really like your work and have a great memory for, I made movies, before a lot of the kids who are into my films were even born, which seems hard to believe because I keep feeling like I'm just getting going.
Yeah,
but, so you hear the feedback's always really great, and they have a great memory for things that a lot of which I definitely have forgotten over the years. I made movies in the mid to late 70s, and I had people talking about Laser Blast and Tourist Trap and all these weird movies, and I'm trying to remember. Yeah, okay, I know I made them, but
yeah,
you really know the movie better than me.
Let me ask you about the getting your films in front of people and the whole marketing of these films, because I would think with these genre of films that you make, you can kind of call upon your inner William Castle,
right.
the kind of showman aspect of it all.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm on one hand grateful that we live in an age where there's so many delivery systems. I mean, that's the problem, where it's kind of it's like the Roger Waters album after he left Pink Floyd. It was called Amused to Death. We have so much here, and there's a lot of confusion because, the middle of the country are still pretty much get their DVDs at either a Redbox or they're buying them, from the value bin at Walmart. I mean, most of the country still looks at these films on DVD one way or the other. Having said that, the whole idea of delivering and being clever with how you market these commercial escapism exploitation movies is so appealing to me. And sometimes I wish I was William Castle. I wish it was a theatrical venue where you could rig the theater and float ghosts and put buzzers on people's seats, and you can't do that anymore because now people either they're watching them on an iPad, a phone, or they're home. So now what can we do to make these films just a little different and in terms of marketing? And it's tough because you're first it's spread all over the place, so it's no longer one venue. So whatever you would invent for a little sliver of the media pie wouldn't probably work for the next delivery system. So I think you have to embed things in the movies that I'm working on some things now that I can't really talk about, but they're just more fun things for the fans to discover and then hook into different films and contests. And we're trying to do everything. I mean, an obvious example is a lot of these films are very toyetic, so we're big into resin statues and replicas and a whole slew of new and fun merchandise. But I guess there's no difference between, in a tiny way, what we're doing and what Disney does when they release, Oz, and you can buy all those characters, plush toys and, whatever the action figures or the dolls are. But because we're dealing with usually either evil, maniacal, or bizarre puppet dolls and monsters, we can go a little further and just try to be a little more unorthodox. So I've got some plans that I'm going to try to wiggle into these movies. Other than the fact that a lot of fans haven't caught on yet to some things we've embedded in these films that will eventually make some kind of sense. If any of this makes any sense. I mean, I'll give you one example, which is that most people are going to hate me when I say this, but I'm a super avid non-smoker, and I mean, there have been a few little moments that have sort of slipped through, but someone could watch every movie I've made, start to finish, and very hard to find anyone smoking.
Yeah.
Now that's not even a message. That's just because I've had too many people close to me become very ill and disappear because of that habit. So, why not, draw the line and say, listen, there's no reason really for anyone to smoke cigarettes in my films. Now, weed's a different story. In Evil Bong, there are people smoking weed. Not that I'm a huge advocate of weed, but it's, that's a little different than people smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have some fun things we're building into these movies, and I think people will begin to figure it out in about a year.
Well, I know you're pressed for time. I was told I have 20 minutes with you, but forgive me.
Sure.
I wanted to ask one last question.
Yeah.
Because I was reading through interviews with you today, and you mentioned something about working with Gary Busey, and you said I have stories to tell, and yet I didn't see any stories. Do you have one anecdote about Gary Busey? Because
I have an endless amount of amazing Gary Busey stories. Excuse me, and they're impossible to tell in a minute or two. I tell them on stage because they're all kind of intricate and involved, and I sort of take on the persona of Gary Busey when I tell them. So anybody who wants to attend any of these shows, I'm doing 4 or 5 this year. The first one coming up is Horror Hound in Cincinnati, Ohio, in a couple of weeks. I'll be there. But, of course, Comic-Con and all the obvious ones. Gary was incredible to work with. He's a super, super talented guy. Definitely different, definitely bizarre. And considering the number of stories I have to tell and I've told, I only worked with Gary one day.
Wow.
He was on set one day, and then I worked with him a day after the show was done because he played the voice of the little evil cookie. So I worked with him on an ADR stage. So all these stories come from the experience of being around the guy for maybe 15 hours.
Wow. Okay.
So he's a trip.
To keep up to date with where you're going to be in the new releases, I should direct our listening audience to Full Moon Horror and Full Moon Direct.
Just fullmoondirect.com. That's the site that they'll find the news. They can buy the stuff or know what's going on. We also have grindhouseflix.com, which is the streaming movie site, and more and more of these bizarre concoctions are going to premiere there. I mean, it's a great deal. You can look at Ooga Booga right now for $1.99. You can't get cheaper than that. Or you can subscribe for $4.99, and we're serving up 4 or 5 features every single month. Some of the older classic ones, some new ones, some things that no one's ever seen before. So, it's a fun and very inexpensive thing to become part of. So we're hoping over a few years we build it into something where we can help fund some more projects because, we're just film junkies here.